Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar with Sarah Keogh as part of the Coeliac Society's Gluten-Free Living Week. You just want to bear with me for a few minutes. We're just going to make sure that we have people on the call. We're currently letting people in a slow fashion. Just going to give it a few minutes for people to actually click through on the link now. So again, welcome to this afternoon's webinar with the Coeliac Society of Ireland, where we'll be talking with our consultant dietitian, our in-house dietitian with the Coeliac Society, Sarah Keogh, who will be talking on this webinar about eating for immunity. Just going to let it go for a few minutes because we want people to give people a chance. It is lunchtime after all. So Sarah, as I'm just waiting for participants there to clock in, how are things going for you? How are you finding, and how have you found the last 10 months?
Well, I think like everyone else, it's been a bit crazy. So yeah, I'd work at home a little bit anyway, but being at home all the time has definitely been an adjustment. I'm finding when I am on phone calls with people, they're going much longer both ways because I think everybody's just looking for somebody to talk to after all of this time. So no, it's good. It's been nice. I haven't missed kind of traveling. But yeah, I've missed kind of, I think like you, it's different not being in the office with everybody and, you know, just the usual daily catch-ups.
Absolutely. That is something I do miss. I just had an hour and a half of what we call a collaborating work afternoon with our head of finance. So that was fun. So while I worked, she worked, and we were both able to see each other. So that's something I think I'm going to try a bit more with the team. What's really interesting is I just got off a call with my sister-in-law in Australia, and where they live up in southern Queensland, they have no incidences of COVID. So they're able to still go out and socialize and have parties, and it looks amazing. Of course, they have lovely warm weather at the present. So
yeah, I'm jealous.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Okay, well, we're coming up to 1:05, Sarah. So what made you choose this as a topic, eating for immunity?
Well, I mean, we've done a couple of different nutrition sessions every year for the Gluten-Free Living Show, but I think this year it's one of the things we actually had members calling in and emailing in from March all the way through. You know, we'd often get lots of people contacting us with questions, but it was interesting how often this one turned up. So I think it's definitely an area people are thinking about and they're interested in, both from the point of view of the coronavirus, but also as the kids have gone back to school. And, you know, they're all coming home with the usual coughs and colds and tummy bugs and all the rest. I think people are just thinking a little bit more about if there's something that they can do from a nutrition point of view that might just help their immunity. And I suppose what struck me as well is that there's been a huge amount of stuff online that, you know, as a dietitian, I've just been sort of laughing at, but I think a lot of people don't realize some of it's nonsense. So I kind of wanted to tackle some of the myths there as well and just really let people know that there are some things they can do, but there's no miracles, unfortunately, with this.
Okay, well, just so as for the participants who are on the call, you can actually ask questions either through the chat function or you can ask questions through the Q&A. And of course, this is your seminar as much as it's our seminar. So if you have any questions as we go along, after each slide, or Sarah has taken a breath, I'll give her a chance to catch her breath. I'll look through the questions and see and pose them to her as we go along. So Sarah, if you'd like to kick off there, thanks very much again for taking the time today.
No problem at all. So look, you're very welcome to our seminar on eating for immunity. And as I just said, really the idea of this session is just to take you through some of the foods and nutrients that we know are important for supporting a healthy immune system. And hopefully you'll get some tips today that you can start to use. Before we jump right into immunity, I'm going to come back to something that I say an awful lot, which is that you are what you eat. And I know it's something that everybody has heard, but I'd love you all just to think about it for a minute, because you're literally built out of the foods that you put into your body. So everything about you, from skin and hair right through to muscle and bone, these are all made out of what you ate yesterday and last week and last month, because your body is constantly updating. I don't know if you've ever heard that you get new skin every 28 days. You know, a lot of the dust around your house is actually your skin falling off, because you're going to shed about 50 million skin cells a day. So we've new skin every 28 days. We get new bones every 10 years. Every muscle on your body is replaced every 100 days. So we are remodeling and updating all the time. And what you're eating right now is what's going to do that.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Where does the muscle that I'm regenerating every 100 days go? Where's the old stuff gone?
It breaks it down. It's sort of, if you can imagine, it's sort of breaking down and replacing constantly. So if what it starts today in 100 days, then that has been renewed completely.
Unbelievable. You learn something new every day.
Yeah, you replace 10% of your heart every year. Like, it's just incredible that we are updating all the time.
That's freaky.
Isn't it? But it's fascinating because people sometimes say to me with nutrition, is it not too late to start? I'm like, no, it really isn't. You know, it doesn't matter where you are, you know, new skin in 28 days, we can all do that, you know.
Yeah.
So it's fabulous. And this is the same thing with the immune system, because we are developing our immune system all the time. So even if it hasn't been brilliant up to now, you've been prone to lots of coughs and colds and things like that, maybe nutrition is the thing that's going to get you started.
Great. So, sounds like a plan.
So what is your immune system? So I've given this talk back when we were allowed to actually go into places face to face and say, what's your immune system? And I always love the blank faces you get from people, because we talk about immune system a lot. But when you say to what is it, most people can't tell you. Like, they can tell you where their stomach is, or their gut is, or their arm is, but immune system. And the reason for that is that there's actually a lot of different parts of your body involved in immunity for you. And there's everything from your skin to your gut, to your blood, to your bone marrow, and lots of other places in between. There's your spleen and everything else. So we've lots of different parts of the body involved. But that means that we need a wide range of nutrients to keep all of that working. There's no one vitamin or mineral or food that's actually going to sort out all those different parts of your body. So a good balanced diet is really what you're thinking about when it comes to this. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the skin and immunity. And part of your immune system is what we'll call your barrier immune system. And your skin is a big barrier that stops bacteria and other germs actually getting into your body. So if you've ever had a cut that got infected, so what happened was that once you broke that skin barrier, bacteria could get in under the skin, and immediately we see an infection with that. So we need that strong barrier to help stop germs coming into the body. And so skin needs lots of foods, but if I was going to call out some key ones to look at from a skin point of view, you're looking at vitamin A, healthy fats, and then zinc. And where you're going to find your vitamin A is found in some oily fish. But we also get vitamin A from a lot of our vegetables. And what's interesting there is what you'll find in things like carrots and red peppers, a thing called beta carotene. And, you know, you might be familiar with beta carotene. Sometimes people take it if, you know, they're going on holidays to help their tan. So, but when we eat beta carotene, your body actually turns it into vitamin A. So if you go for vegetables and fruits that are red or orange, particularly things like carrots, red peppers, they'll have a lot of beta carotene in them. Kale, even though it's green, actually has huge amounts of beta carotene. Dried apricots as a snack actually are brilliant. And then when we look at some of the healthy fats, we're talking about things like the omega-3, so think oily fish like salmon and mackerel. And then zinc is a mineral that's really important for strong, healthy skin. And you're going to find that in things like almonds, hazelnuts, chia seeds, and sunflower seeds. And they're all foods that you can add.
I just so happen to have a jar of almonds here.
When you prepared earlier, yeah?
When I prepared earlier.
So, I mean, it's exactly that. And they're great snacks. And so those foods together actually give your skin a lot of strength, because vitamin A helps to hold moisture in your skin. So if you are low in vitamin A, your skin can get quite dry and flaky, and it's a common enough cause of dry skin. And then healthy fats help to give sort of elasticity to the skin. So, you know, if you kind of pull your skin a little bit, it's a little bit elastic. But if that's weak, your skin can sort of tear and break more easily. But if you have the healthy fats in there, that really helps. And then zinc, again, is about strength in the skin. So those three really combine very well to keep the skin barrier nice and strong. So that's our first section.
Well, I know a really good question that I'm sure a lot of not done to be gender biased or anything, but a lot of women will be asking now on the Q&A is, does it prevent wrinkles?
Well, it might, but we do know vitamin A might, because it's an antioxidant. Now we can come on someday and do a whole thing on just skin one of the days. So I can't say these are definitely going to prevent wrinkles, but there's other things you can take that apparently do.
Oh, good.
So we can come to that. That might be a session for another day.
I should have asked Kevin Dundon yesterday about kale, because I find when I cook with kale, it's such a fibrous, almost like it's such a fibrous vegetable that it can be very hard to break down in the system. I know I try to use it chopped very finely and try and do it in the pan with a little bit of butter. try and break it down that way, and also to try and steam it. But is there anything you would recommend for getting more kale into our diet?
Put it in the oven. I mean, take out the big stalks, but then cut it up small. And if you, now you'll need to dry it really well and then put a bit of oil in a tin, but literally massage the kale with the oil. Take 2 minutes and just rub it in. And you can put salt and all kinds of things onto it. But kale crisps, you actually pop it into the oven like that. I don't know what it does, but the texture is completely different and they're actually lovely.
Okay.
I've even seen kids eat these if you don't tell them what it actually is. And it's amazing. But you need to actually either, if you're frying it, fry it till it's crispy. And I would fry it in toasted sesame oil if I was going to do that. So give it a longer cooking till it's crispy, or put it in the oven, because when it's crispy, you'll eat mountains of it and not notice.
I must have a look. I must give that a go and see how it goes. So what's next, Sarah?
So the next one then is looking at the whole digestive system. And, I think we don't need to talk to people with celiac disease about problems with digestion. But one thing that does turn up for lots and lots of people with celiac disease is the lack of fiber. And this is particularly important because your gut, your digestive system, is a huge part of your immune system. So first of all, it's part of the barrier immune system. So the way that we have acid in our stomach. So when we eat, all our food goes into this hydrochloric acid in our stomach. But that acid kills bacteria. That's its big job. It kills most of the germs that come in. So, if you get a tummy bug, it's hopefully quite unusual. And it's usually something particularly strong that was able to sort of do okay, and the stomach acid worked. So that acid is a very important part of our immune system, as well as starting to digest our food. And we also know that, the gut is obviously the part of the body that clears out a lot of waste and toxins and things like that. So we want that to keep working. So when we look, for example, at colon cancer, people who eat lower levels of fiber, they get a little bit more colon cancer. And one of the reasons for that is that the food stays longer touching up against the wall of the bowel. And so if there's anything nasty in there that you don't really want, it can trigger some of the early changes that can lead to cancer. And that's why putting plenty of fiber into the digestive system keeps all that waste moving on and out nice and quickly. And it just supports the whole health of the gut. So the big problem with it in terms of fiber is that 80% of people do not eat enough fiber, and that can actually jump as high as 92% when you talk to people with celiac disease. And that's because a lot of us rely on things like wholemeal bread or wheat-based cereals for fiber. And then when they go out of the diet, not everybody manages to replace them. But as I said, even before someone has celiac disease, they can be really missing out on fiber. So a couple of things to have a look at. Whole grain cereals can be good, but obviously the very easy ones to get tend to have wheat or malt in them. So if you are going for gluten-free breakfast cereals, do have a look for fiber on the label. So if you look at the per 100 grams, you'd want to have at least 6 grams of fiber per 100 grams. And actually quite a few of them do have it. I've seen some getting up towards 12 grams per 100 gram, which is brilliant. But it's worth remembering that if you do have a high fiber cereal for breakfast, you're probably getting maybe 5 grams of fiber in that. If you're someone who's able to eat oats, a nice big bowl of porridge is going to give you about 3 grams of fiber. Why does that matter? We need to get 25 grams of fiber a day. So if you can kind of keep that number in your head for a minute, 25 is what you're after. Wow. So if you only think about fiber at breakfast time and you're only getting 3 to 5 grams of fiber, that's going to be a problem. So you have to think, yeah.
Sorry, just before we go on, I understand how important that is. We should really put up on our website just what grams of fiber you can get from what. So for example, if I ate 10 almonds or 30 almonds, what does that give me? That kind of thing. I think it's really important to allow people to, I certainly know when I was looking at this for myself that I found it was really easy to be able to look at what I was putting into my body and go, well, I have 10 grams there, or I have 15 grams there.
Yeah, I know we've done some articles on it before, but yeah, I think we could put a more detailed list up for sure. Because if you look at something like fruit and veg, like if you had an apple or a serving of carrots, that's going to give you about 2 grams of fiber, which is why we'll always talk about eating lots of fruit and veg every day. But a great place to add fiber are nuts and seeds. So if you get 2 dessert spoons of any seeds, doesn't matter which one, but you throw them into cereal in the morning, or you put them into a yogurt, or you add them into bread or anything like that, those 2 dessert spoons of seeds will add about 6 grams of fiber. So, if you had your porridge in the morning and you put some seeds into it, maybe, had an apple with it or a banana, then, you're up around sort of 10 or 11 grams of fiber with that.
Oh, great.
So you can kind of do it. It's more just thinking about it a little bit. Yeah. And then
I make my own granola at home now, and I throw in at least probably 3. So I make enough granola that'll give me probably about a bowl every day for 5 days. So what I do is I throw in maybe a third of a pack of mixed seeds that I would get in some place like SuperValu, or in the health food store, and some chia seeds as well, whole chia seeds, and put them into that as well. Then mix it all up with the gluten-free oats, some coconut oil, coconut butter that I would have, broken down into oil, and just a little bit of honey. And I think that certainly is some way of getting the fibre in on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. That can be really good. And you'll get up to nearly, 8 or 9 grams of fibre with something like that in the morning. So it's really good. Beans and lentils then are another brilliant source of fibre. So if you look at, the like small tins of like chickpeas or kidney beans, there's about 10 grams of fibre in those. So if you had like a bean salad, try roasting chickpeas. That's a brilliant way to have them. And, instead of doing something like popcorn or crisps, there's loads and loads of recipes. I know we've put up some recipes about roasting chickpeas because they're obviously going to be gluten-free, but they really taste better than anyone expects. They're quite good. And then lentils into things like soups or stews or casseroles or lentil curry or anything like that is going to really work. Now I just see there's a question in the chat here where someone is asking, can not eating enough fibre cause bloating? And yes, definitely, because if you do become constipated, where things are hanging around for a lot longer in the digestive system, the bacteria in there are going to make a lot more gas out of that. So that really can cause bloating. So sometimes for a lot of people, if things are a little bit sluggish and they're a little bit bloated, adding in fibre can make a huge difference. Now, lots of other things can cause bloating, but you'd always start by checking fibre to see if that's actually the problem.
I see we have a roasted chickpea recipe is in our Coeliac Living magazine this month as well.
Brilliant.
Which is great, fantastic.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's a nice recipe. So the other part of the gut that's involved in the immune system are the bacteria. So we naturally have millions and millions of gut bacteria, and they do lots of things for us. They support the immune system. They help to regulate sort of things like mood a little bit. We see now more research showing that they're regulating appetite and might actually play a really important role in weight management. So lots and lots of benefits there. But what we do know is they help to really support the immune system, and we need to look after them so that they can look after us right back. But they can be affected by lots of things. So if you've taken antibiotics, a lot of people will notice changes in their digestion when they do that. Now, that's not to say don't take your antibiotics. If your doctor has prescribed them for you, there's a reason. So you do need to do that. Tummy bugs can certainly change them, gastroenteritis, anything like that. Celiac disease can do it, because in lots of people with celiac disease, foods that should have been digested higher up in the digestive system are making it down into the large bowel where the bacteria are, and those bacteria are reacting. And that's actually one of the reasons why people with celiac disease can often get diarrhea, because the bacteria are reacting to foods that kind of shouldn't be there. And then stress can have a role there as well. So there's lots of things we can do to look after our bacteria. So, we often hear people talk about probiotics and prebiotics. And probiotics are bacteria that, there's actually a very strong definition. They have to have 3 things to be a probiotic bacteria. 1, it has to be alive. 2, it has to be able to survive your stomach acid. And 3, it has to be able to get into your large bowel and do something positive. So there's a very great difference between a bacteria that's just live and a bacteria that's probiotic, because a live bacteria will just be killed by your stomach acid, whereas live probiotic bacteria will actually make it through. So, if you sometimes pick up yogurt, sometimes they will say live on them, but that's not the same thing as probiotic. So there's lots of products out there that you can get. There's tablets and there's little drinks and everything, and they can be quite useful. There's a lot of very good research behind most of them. Not all of them, to be honest. I'd like to see a little bit more for some, but there's actually good research in terms of supporting the immune system with quite a few of them. So that's one option. But for me, what I would much rather look at are the prebiotics. And prebiotics are basically food for your gut bacteria. And that's how to think about them. Think about them as foods you eat that actually go up down and feed your own gut bacteria so that they stay nice and healthy for you. And basically, prebiotics are lots of different kinds of fiber. So fiber, we've spoken about fiber in terms of just keeping everything moving in the gut and reducing bloating and things like that. But fiber also feeds your gut bacteria. And because you've lots of different kinds of gut bacteria, you need lots of different kinds of fiber coming in there. So, we look at things like beta-glucan, which comes from oats. Now, it's in barley as well, but obviously our celiac people are not going to be eating that one. But if you're someone who can tolerate oats, that beta-glucan is an excellent type of fiber to eat. And it actually helps to lower cholesterol as well. Then you have things like pectins, which we find in fruit and vegetables, and then roughage from the whole grains. So it's a nice thing to try and find some of the whole grains that you can, that are gluten-free and that you can take, because, you know, if you absolutely, wheat is out, but it's lovely to get some of the other whole grains in. So things like quinoa and so on that actually are going to be gluten-free and good to use.
Okay, well, I have a question as it happens in here from the Q&A. There are
Yeah.
so many different supplements out there. It's hard to figure out which one is the best. I presume this is in relation to fiber. Those
Yeah.
recommendations you've given there, Sarah, are fantastic. What about things like chia seeds, milled chia, milled flaxseed? But there's another one, I'm trying to think, begins with an R, I think. I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but it's those kind of things. Are they good? Would they be considered good for
Really,
fiber?
really good. Yeah, I mean, all kinds of seeds, and that's the thing, because, you know, every so often something gets very fashionable, you know. So
Yeah.
chia seeds are very, very fashionable at the moment. But, you know, any seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin, sesame, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter whether you eat them whole or you get them ground up or you have, you know, it's absolutely fine, whatever way you want to take them. So they're all going to be fantastic, both for vitamins and minerals, but also particularly for the fiber.
And like, what are you recommending in relation to, say, something like flaxseed or milled flaxseed? Are we talking a dessert spoon?
To be honest, two dessert spoons a day of seeds is generally a really good idea. Now, if someone is having a really big problem with maybe a slow digestion, you can go up to about 4 dessert spoons of flaxseed or linseed a day, but I wouldn't do that straight away. You definitely need to work that up over 3 or 4 weeks. But if you're having a problem that is requiring 4 dessert spoons of flax seeds a day to get you going, I would definitely be popping into the GP to see if there's anything else going on, and then maybe contact your Corey registered dietitian just to have a bit of a wider look through what might be happening.
Great stuff. We have a list of recommended dietitians through the Coeliac Society. Of course, we have Sarah, if anybody'd like to see her. She's still taking clinics via Zoom, which are all, of course, confidential. And if you are interested in doing that, Sarah is available next Monday and Tuesday for follow-up dietitian clinics. And we do have other people who are also available that we can recommend as well if Sarah is booked out. What have you got next for us, Sarah?
I was just going to finish off on one thing here and just say that don't all go off very enthusiastic and try and have 25 grams of fiber tomorrow. You do want to gradually work that up. If you're not eating a whole lot of fiber and you suddenly add in a lot, your digestive system will not be happy.
No.
So you need to just gradually bring it in. So maybe add 3 or 4 grams of fiber and let your body over a few days get used to that and then go up again. So, you know, it should take you maybe 3 weeks to get all of that fiber going in.
Okay, well, as it happens, these questions are starting to come in here pretty quick now, Sarah. So before we crack on, I just have another one. If it hasn't been already covered, which it hasn't, Elaine, what's the best source of calcium for lactose intolerant celiac? Or what are the over-the-counter gluten-free calcium supplements for kids?
So most of the calcium supplements will be gluten-free, but you need to just look at specific ones. So you can contact us and we can have a look and see. But for someone who's lactose intolerant, the lactose-free milk is absolutely the best thing. It's the one I would go to straight away because it has the calcium, but it also still has the iodine and the B vitamins. And a lot of people with celiac disease can be a little bit low in quite a few of their B vitamins when they're diagnosed. So, you know, if you can still take the cow's milk, if it's literally just the lactose that's the problem, the lactose-free milk is brilliant. Cheese is actually low lactose. So most people who are lactose intolerant can actually eat cheese, no problem at all. Yogurt falls in the middle. So most people who are lactose intolerant can manage maybe 2 dessert spoons of yogurt, some more, some less. So that's a little bit individual. Outside of that, good sources for calcium. Of all things, tinned sardines are brilliant. If you eat them with the bones, they actually are equivalent to 2 glasses of milk in terms of calcium. Fortified soya milk would be another one, especially if you're looking for children. I would, if at all possible, you want to keep kids on the milk. But if, say they have an allergy and they really can't take any milk, a fortified soya milk would be the next best thing. And just to really read the label and make sure there's calcium added. In terms of other foods, I hear people talking about things like green vegetables. Realistically, you're not going to get all of your calcium from green veg. They'll give you a little bit, but you know, you'd have to be eating about 16 servings of broccoli a day or about 5 bags of rocket a day to actually get your calcium from the green veg. So they're brilliant as an add-on, but you really want to get in there with your 3 servings of dairy. So, you know, 2 glasses of milk and, you know, a piece of cheese or milk on breakfast cereal.
Never mind all of that broccoli and rocket. All I can think of is the windy bottoms that will come.
Well, it would sort out any fiber issues for people if they did it, you know. But it's just, I sometimes see people and say, oh, you know, I put a handful of rocket in my sandwich at lunchtime and that's my calcium. And you're going, really isn't. Unfortunately, it really isn't. So I would look for those with that.
I have another question here just before we move on, because I do want people to feel that they're actually getting some answers to the questions. A 6-year-old, they be on a vitamin supplement? It would again depend, I presume, on what the symptoms seem to be in relation to that. Afric, if you want to contact Sarah through the Coeliac Society, I'm sure she'll help you with that. You can do it through info@coeliac.ie. High cholesterol, not so bad that it needs statins, but would love a recommendation on something else to use.
Well, if I would be saying, if your doctor is very convinced that you need statins, it's definitely worth, you do have to listen to your doctor. But from a diet point of view, the beta glucan that we mentioned there in oats is very good for lowering cholesterol. But beans and lentil fiber, to be honest, helps to lower cholesterol. So beans and lentils are really, really good. And the flaxseed, there is a sort of a gel inside of those, and what's in that also helps to lower cholesterol. So adding in flaxseed every day, adding in beans and lentils every day. If you can tolerate oats, I'd be putting the oats in nearly every day as well, and that works really, really well. So I would look for those. In terms of supplements that you buy over the counter, the one I've seen quite a lot is red rice yeast, but actually it's just a variation on a statin. It's actually just a naturally occurring statin, so it is the same thing, although people quite like taking it. But it's, as I said, you're more looking at food. So often it's watching the saturated fat in what you're eating, because if you do reduce that, the cholesterol does come down for almost everybody. But what I find is most people don't realize how much saturated fat they're actually eating, or they're adding in things. I mean, I see lots of people, for example, doing things like adding lots of coconut oil into stuff. And while that's fine to use maybe once or twice a week, it's very high in saturated fat. Unfortunately, it does raise cholesterol. So that's something just to keep an eye on. So again, I mean, there's good information out there on cholesterol. We can certainly help anybody with cholesterol as well. But I would be looking at the fiber. If you're looking to add things in to lower cholesterol, that's where I'd be going for that. Okay,
well, Sarah, I know there are some other questions, but I'm going to keep those until after the next slide, perhaps, because I know we want to crack on a bit.
That's all right. So what we're going to just move into now is making immune cells. So this is where, if we do get an infection, the body has lots of immune cells that are sitting there ready to actually deal with that, but it will also start making others. And so if you think about it, when we do have an infection, there's a lot of triggers through the body to start saying, look, start making more of these immune cells. And this trigger goes to your bone marrow, and your bone marrow then has to start making these new cells. So immediately we need the building blocks there for that to happen. So, if people don't have good nutrition or they're missing certain nutrients, it can be a lot harder for their immune system to respond when the time is there and that they actually need to deal with an infection. So there's lots of different ones. But I'm going to call out some of the key ones, which would be zinc, selenium, some of the B vitamins, and vitamin C. And the first one there really are the zinc and selenium. And their job, they do a few things in the body. We've already mentioned zinc in terms of skin, but zinc also is important for what we call cell division. So if you think of the bone marrow, there's a cell in there, and it's like, right, we need lots of these immune cells. So that cell will split and divide, and then the next cells will split and divide. But this splitting and division, you need zinc and selenium right there for that to happen. So we need to make sure that they're coming in on a regular basis. And really good foods for zinc will be almonds, dark chocolate, which is a fantastic source of zinc. It's also quite rich in iron. Now, it is high in saturated fat, so I wouldn't be living on this one. But if you're going to have chocolate for something, the dark chocolate is a really good one to go for.
So you wouldn't have a drawer of it to be able to dip in and out of?
As long as you're only dipping occasionally, but if you're getting through 4 bars a day, you might want to rethink that one. Sardines and a lot of fish actually are rich in zinc, and then pork of all things actually is a very, very good source of zinc. Selenium, then you're going to find it in fish like mackerel, and then in Brazil nuts, tuna, and sunflower seeds are all other really good sources of selenium that we can add in. And they're just excellent ones to do. And you can see over time, there's a lot of nuts and seeds and fish turning up in here. These are important foods, and actually a lot of us don't eat anywhere near enough of these. We do need to be getting the fish in twice a week. We do need to get, a good handful of nuts or seeds in every single day for general health as well as for the fiber.
Okay, just while on that, can spicy foods cause heartburn and celiacs? I've news for you, they can cause heartburn in anybody.
Absolutely everybody. If it's a bit sensitive, definitely. So if you're someone who does react to spicy foods, it's really a case of just sorry. Now what you might do, if you find you're getting a lot of reflux, make sure you do see your GP, because you might just need an antacid for that. There might be just a little bit of a weakness in the valve at the top of the stomach that's just going to do that. So I wouldn't suffer in silence. We tend to do a lot of that. Go and see your GP. Go and see, do you need a little bit of help with that? But yeah, tends to do it to everybody.
I have a specific here. I'm on 400 IU of vitamin D3 since last year as my calcium was extremely low. Is this a regular dosage for celiac, or should I be looking at reducing soon?
I would be, if it's on 400 IU, I'd actually go up to 800 IU, which is about 10, the equivalent of 10 micrograms a day, is what you're looking for. So 400 IU would be the equivalent of about 5 micrograms a day. So for celiac, I'd be definitely saying 10, and on that for life.
And on that for life. Okay.
Yep.
Now, this is another interesting one and does really feed into what we're talking about at the moment in relation to the immune system. Sarah, can you get anything for sore throat, gums and mouth? That would sound to me like the immune system is a little bit low at present, Sarah. So again, it comes down to ensuring that you have this variety of diet of fish, nuts, seeds, dark chocolate, all very important.
And if the mouth is very sore like that, particularly if there's a little bit of redness or anything go on, do go to your dentist. It's really worth just letting them have a look. Have you got maybe an infection in the gums? Is there something stuck in the teeth? You'd be surprised how that can inflame the whole mouth with it. And Irish people were a bit of a disaster for going to the dentist. You know, the traditional approach here is to wait until you're in absolute agony, you know, whereas, you know, you're supposed to be going for the once a year. And people with celiac disease can have more issues around things like mouth ulcers. Now, usually once you're strictly gluten-free, that should go away. So it might be a thing just to double check. If you haven't seen a dietitian in a few years, or you're one of those people with celiac disease who's never seen a dietitian, that might be something just to watch, because we do find people are picking up gluten in places they haven't thought about. But if you have that sore mouth, that sore throat, I'd be going to see the dentist and just get them to have a look over that for you.
Okay, very quickly, daughter recently diagnosed celiac. She's always eaten porridge with no apparent problem. Do I now have to change her to gluten-free oats?
Yes, definitely needs to be on gluten-free oats, no doubt about it. One of the problems with celiac disease is that only about 40% of people with celiac disease will immediately feel sick when they eat gluten. 60% don't, but everybody has the same damage going on the inside. So if you're thinking about long-term in terms of bone health and fertility and things like that, yes, absolutely gluten-free oats, no two ways about it, unfortunately.
Okay, and don't forget, you can get gluten-free oats now pretty much in every supermarket. I do know SuperValu have their own brand gluten-free oats, as do other supermarkets as well. So don't hesitate. If you can't find anything, don't forget you look in our food list, in the food list that you would have gotten as a member. If you're not a member, you get a free food list, and that gets sent out to you pretty much the next day. And we'll have our app next year as well, where you'll be able to check all the gluten-free foods on that as well. Somebody asked again, so it was 800 micrograms of calcium per day, or vitamin D.
No, I'm going to come back to that because we need to get that one right. So it's 800 milligrams of calcium,
right?
Okay, but it is 10 micrograms of vitamin D, which is really, really tiny. If you take 10 milligrams of vitamin D, we'll kill you. So let's not do that.
Okay.
So 10 micrograms.
So 10 micrograms of vitamin D and 800 milligrams of calcium. Okay, I'm going to write this up now for people. 800 ml of calcium. Oops, I can't even spell it.
mg, go on.
And 10 micrograms
of vitamin D.
And that's for life.
Yeah. Now, eat the calcium as your food. Try not to go for supplements unless you're really stuck. But if you can actually get it in from the dairy, we know that builds even better bones than even calcium as a supplement or calcium from other foods. So just the proteins and the combination of nutrition in the dairy is particularly good for bones if you can take it at all.
Okay. All right. No more questions, Sarah. Let's crack on.
Right, on to the next one. So the next one that we're going to take a look at then is going to be vitamin C and B12. And I think vitamin C is probably the most famous vitamin when it comes to immunity. I don't know many people who haven't at some point popped a vitamin C tablet. Now, in terms of colds, there is a little bit of research that suggests, and I'm really being deliberately sort of vague on it, because some research suggests that if you start to take high doses of vitamin C when you get a cold, it might be a little shorter than without it. But as many studies look at it and go, it doesn't make any difference. What I would say, no harm in taking it if you have a cold, but we don't generally recommend that people take high doses of vitamin C all the time, because some of the very long-term studies that we have tracking people maybe over 40 years are suggesting that those taking high levels of vitamin C and vitamin E for years and years and years seem to get a little more cancer and seem to get a little more heart disease. Now, it's not definite either, but what we would say is that people getting the same amount of vitamin C from food seem to live longer and get less cancer. So rather than always going to supplements for vitamin C, let's have a look at where you get it. And so you're going to get your vitamin C in fruit and veg, particularly fruit. There is a little in vegetables, but most of your vitamin C is going to be in your fruits. So really, really rich ones will be kiwis are very high, citrus, so your oranges, mandarins, lemons, anything like that, grapefruit. And then berries are really high. So strawberries and raspberries would be really, really rich in vitamin C, but anything like bananas will have vitamin C, apples have vitamin C, all of the fruit. The real thing is just to be making sure that you're getting 2 or 3 pieces of fruit in every day, and then get your veg as well. Vitamin B12 then is another key nutrient for the immune system, and it's very important in terms of making new blood cells. And vitamin B12 is an interesting one because we don't actually find it in sort of plants. It's not in sort of fruit and veg. You're going to get it in animal foods. So you're really looking at things like milk. There'll be a little bit in yogurt, all kinds of meat. So, but that's chicken, red meat, pork, anything like that. Eggs are good sources. And then fish is a really, really good source of B12. And it's one just to watch, because if someone is on a fully plant-based diet, and lots of people are choosing to do that, they just need to make sure that if they're doing that, that you are definitely eating food that has B12 added. So it needs to be fortified with B12, or you're taking a B12 supplement. And I see there's a lot of sort of myths online around this one, because I was talking to somebody and they're going, oh, but there's bacteria in the soil make B12, and should we get that? But unfortunately, plants don't actually use B12, so they don't take it up. So even if there is B12 in the soil, it's not coming into plants, so it doesn't come into the diet. I have heard people talk about seaweed as well. And if you run seaweed through a laboratory test for B12, it looks like there's huge amounts in it. But when you actually feed it to people, it doesn't behave like B12 in the body. So what we call that is an analog of B12. So that's something that looks a lot like B12 but doesn't act like B12. So really, if you're just not taking any milk or meat or fish or eggs or anything like that, do make sure that your B12 levels are okay, because they can be low anyway for someone who's celiac. They're ones that often can be a bit tricky for us.
Okay, couple of questions in. This is great. Thanks for interacting, everybody, and I'm delighted to see that the questions are coming in, and thank you for taking the time to do so. Brenda, if the product is not in the gluten-free book, should I avoid using it even if it doesn't mention gluten in the ingredients? I would say for now, yes, but please contact us on info@coeliac.ie. Tell us the name of that product, and what we will do is get in touch with the manufacturers to ensure that all of the manufacturing facility is celiac safe and gluten-free, and if they are, we'll put them into the book for the coming year. But thanks a million for bringing that to our attention. If we don't have it, please let us know and we will check it out for you. What's the purpose of B12 in the diet, please?
So it does lots of things. So it's important for the immune system, but it also helps to make red blood cells. So sometimes, even if you've lots of iron, your hemoglobin can still be low if you don't have enough B12. And it's also really important for nerve health. So if someone has very low levels of B12 for a few years, they can actually have permanent damage to their nervous system from that. And it's one of the reasons why you'll flag it up. I mean, it does a few other things, but the blood levels and the nervous system and the immune system would be the three sort of big ones that you'd look at for there.
Okay. How many eggs per day is recommended for a child?
1 a day.
Grant, that's an easy answer. How many berries is a portion of fruit a day?
Do you know the American cup measures? About half of one of those. So half a cup, or an ordinary Irish tea cup. A little bit less than that. It's maybe 3 or 4 dessert spoons.
Okay.
Would be with that, yeah.
I have an 11-year-old here who doesn't like milk. Mom finds it very hard to get fruit into her. They've tried all sorts of fruits, but she just gets fed up with them. What's the best advice you can give for sufficient intake of nutrients and vitamins?
To be honest, it's usually sitting down and seeing what the person is doing. So if she's eating vegetables, she's probably going to get enough vitamin C, and that will be fine. If you have kids who absolutely won't take milk, I mean, I would check and make sure she's not lactose intolerant, because sometimes for younger kids, the reason they won't take it is because it makes them feel sick. So sometimes trying them on lactose-free milk can be a good way just to find out. The other thing you can look at is sometimes giving someone, say, a glass of milk to drink, or milk and breakfast cereal they don't take, but they might drink a hot chocolate. You can make a white sauce that goes with dinner, cauliflower cheese, things like that. Years ago, you get people taking things like rice puddings, which can actually work really well. So sometimes you're looking at desserts, custards and stuff. They don't all have to have loads of sugar added to them, but the calcium is just so important that you might look at other ways of getting them in from that if they don't take it. If she's really, really just not going to take any calcium, I would check in. If she's only 11, I would definitely go and see a dietitian. And really just get that checked out, because it's particularly for girls, they take their big growth spurt around the age of 11 and 12. Yeah. So you don't want them to be missing their calcium at that age. It's really important right now to get that one looked at.
This is a really interesting question. It is something that we do try and bang on about every year as well. Should you get your blood test done every year to check if you're gluten without knowing? Yes.
Yes. Every
absolutely.
year, your birthday check, your iron, your B12, your folic acid, your vitamin D, and your TTGs every year.
Absolutely. We constantly bang on about that here in the Celiac Society, people. get your blood test done every single year. It is so important.
And you know, you're supposed to see your dietitian every year, but I don't know anyone who actually gets that, you know, within it. But best practice is for it to be reviewed once a year for it.
Absolutely. And again, remember, once you've had one dietitian appointment with Sarah, the next one is discounted because it's considered a follow-up appointment. So if you get in for the first one as a member, it's €75, and for the follow-up one, then it's 55 thereafter. So every, you know, you pay 175 in 1 year and 55 every year after, just to ensure that you're healthy and well and getting the right nutrients and minerals and foods into you as well. I think that's a great offer for members of the society. I have a question here from Thomas. Are supplements okay if finding it hard to get some parts into the diet? For example, a B12 supplement. I substituted almond coconut milk instead of milk, etc., because he finds it easier on his gut.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly add in supplements, and definitely I would take supplements rather than go without. I would always look at food for the simple reason that if you eat something like fruit for vitamin C, you don't just get vitamin C. You also get fiber, you also get antioxidants. So with foods, they give you so much more than just the one nutrient you're chasing. But if you are struggling, there's no problem to use supplements. Again, with the almond or coconut milk, just make sure there's calcium added. Some brands do and some brands don't, so just read the label and make sure the calcium is in there. I'd also have a look if you're struggling with it. Might be the lactose that's the problem. So you could try the lactose-free milk if you wanted to. I mean, if it's working for you, there's no problem. But it's just something to look at because lactose intolerance is quite common in people with celiac disease. And now most people, it should clear up once the gluten is fully out of the diet. Now in some adults that can take maybe 2 years to resolve, but for most people it'll be gone within 6 months. So you know, if you're celiac and lactose intolerant, within about 6 months to a year of going strictly gluten-free, it's often worth just testing the lactose again. And that's something we'd often do with someone on their birthday check when they come back in. If they've been off the milk, we'll go and actually do a reintroduction with that. Just because I often think you've enough restricted in your diet with trying to avoid gluten. You don't need to be avoiding milk as well unless you absolutely have to.
Another one here, Sarah, I have Hashimoto's and managed that and weighed for a few years with a paleo, not strict type diet. I'm concerned though about fiber. I eat a lot of veg, but not complex carbs. Would you advise adjusting my diet?
No, I mean, you can get plenty of fiber without having all of the carbohydrate products in there. So, I mean, if you are really getting the seeds in and plenty of fruit and vegetables, and then I know with paleo, beans and lentils technically aren't on it now, which is a bit unfortunate because actually prehistoric man did in fact eat beans, but they don't seem to be allowed on the modern day paleo diet. So they're generally in there. But if you're, okay, I'll be a bit specific here. If you're going to the loo once a day and it's coming out nice and easy and it looks a bit like a cracked sausage, you probably have enough fiber in there. With that, so that can work fine with it. So it's kind of see how you go with that.
Okay, if you have any questions in relation to that, come back to us, info@coeliac.ie, and they'll be passed on to Sarah. And the details have been put up on the chat and of course on our website if anybody wants to get an appointment with Sarah. Again, it's info@coeliac.ie. Question here about what test should I ask the doctor to do for check for gluten? You ask him to tick the box for TTGs, trans-glutamate. Sarah, you can say it so much better than me.
Tissue transglutaminase.
There you go. That's
TTG,
the one. TTGs. Yeah. Where I'm looking into the closed captions on the screen, Liz. I know our IT partners are on in the background here, so we're going to have a look at that for you now and see if we can get anything. But I'd say it probably will be on the recording when it goes live after this event. I'm sorry, we might be able to do it for you straight now. 13-year-old son is celiac and type 1 diabetic. I find some of the gluten-free foods seem to have a lot of added sugar and fats. How do we work around this? Well, I want to just pretty much jump in there before Sarah does give you the answer to that, Paula. It is actually something that's very close to our hearts here at the Coeliac Society, and it's something that we're going to try and look at and get working with the food manufacturers in 2021. I'm sorry, we can't get to it any sooner than that, to try and see if we can get the reduction in the number of sugar and fats in gluten-free foods, because we do know they're added for taste, but there has to be some sort of workaround for this in a manufacturing perspective. Sarah, from a dietetic and nutrition perspective, what can this lady do?
That one is trickier, and what I would say is because balancing type 1 diabetes and with celiac disease is actually really complex, I'm not going to give you any advice here on that. I would say that I would imagine he does have a dietitian that he sees. So if you're struggling with that, if you can go back to the diabetes unit and give them a call and just see if they can give you some specific help with it, because it is an issue that comes up quite a bit, that there's a little more sugar with it. But usually with type 1 diabetes, it's total carbohydrate that's an issue there. So it might just be a case of balancing insulin with it. But I'm not going to talk to you about that today. I would definitely refer you back to your diabetes dietitian to have a look at that and see if they can balance it for you.
Yes, there will be a recording of this again later, Niamh. It will be up on our website. Those people who have actually participated here today, all nearly 150 of you, thank you so much for tuning in. That will be all. The link will be sent out to you after this event later on this evening, once we have, you know, edited my face, done my hair, done my makeup, and made sure that I look fantastic as Sarah does today on the call. Then we'll be putting it up. I'm only joking. It'll be up there within probably by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock this evening. Thank you. All right, Sarah, that seems to be some of the questions for now. Shall we crack on another wee bit?
Okay. I mean, the next one is vitamin D, which I think we've kind of covered a little bit. So we often, as I talk about vitamin D for calcium and bones, but actually it's an important part of the immune system as well. And you may have seen some reports over the last few months about the role of vitamin D in helping with coronavirus. And we actually good research now showing that in terms of treating it. Now, this is in hospital on really, really high doses that you're not to do at home. But it reduced the numbers of people actually going into ICU with COVID. But just for general health, as we mentioned earlier, we do need to take a supplement because in Ireland, we do not get enough sunshine to make the vitamin D that we need. We're sitting here in October, so even if it's sunny today, the sun that hits Ireland from October through to March is too weak to make any vitamin D. So we just need to be on it. And there's a specific recommendation in general for all children to take under the age of 4 to certainly take vitamin D from sort of Halloween to St. Patrick's Day. But if we're people with celiac disease, you need to take it all year round. And to be honest, I'd recommend it for everybody all year round with the supplement.
I'm just looking here. Oh yeah, very good question in here from Carmel. I got diagnosed with celiac via raised TTG in August. Have not had a biopsy as I'm gluten-free for 10 weeks now and was told it may not be conclusive. Gluten-free diet is working very well for me. Is that approach okay? Now, before I let Sarah in on this, Carmel, I just want to say to you that endoscopies are the gold standard for adult diagnosis of celiac disease, but because endoscopy waiting lists are so long at the moment, you know, you probably are best to stick with the way you are, because you have to be on a gluten diet in order to get a proper endoscopy. So Sarah, from my own perspective, I presume, you know, if you're healthy and well, having gone off gluten after 10 weeks and you're content staying off gluten without getting a conclusive diagnosis of celiac disease, would you still be, I suppose, pushing for an endoscopy at some point in the future?
Definitely. I definitely would. You need to confirm the diagnosis if you can. I mean, it's a real problem at the moment with the delay, because once you've gone off gluten and you're feeling better, you know, you have to go back on it for 6 weeks before you have the biopsy, and you have to go back on it at every meal for 6 weeks. So it's actually hard, and a lot of people don't make it. It's one of the reasons why we really would love, and it's something that we look at with the Celiac Society, is from the blood test to the biopsy to be really short. I mean, you can go through life and just go be strictly gluten-free, but there's a couple of issues there, because what I find is people who are in that limbo, they don't get referred to a dietitian. So although they're avoiding the gluten they can see, they're not getting the really detailed information. They also tend not to get the information around the iron and the B vitamins and the calcium that they need. But also it means that you're not automatically scheduled, say, for your bone scan, which you do need to get. And you know, when you go to get your bloods done every year, it's harder to go those. If you go, well, I'm gluten intolerant, you're less likely to be able to say, yes, I need my iron done and my vitamin D done and so on. Now, if you've raised TTG, the thing what's interesting there is this person is saying, I got diagnosed as celiac. You didn't get diagnosed as celiac. You had a screening test that suggests you might be celiac. The diagnosis is actually the biopsy. And I know it sounds like it's a painful way to actually go about it. But the reality is that the blood test on its own is not diagnostic in adults. It can be in children if it's really, really high and a gastroenterologist has examined them and looked at their symptoms and things like that. But for adults at the moment, no, it's not considered diagnostic, because it does miss some people with celiac disease, but it also, you can have a false positive sometimes where it's saying that you're celiac, but actually you're not. So it's, you know, it's a diet to go on. Now, the fact that you're feeling better with the gluten is fantastic. And it, again, suggests it probably is celiac disease, but I would still, if you can in the future, have a look at kind of going back onto the gluten for the biopsy. And that's what I'd say to anyone. If you think you might be celiac, really just try and stay on the gluten until you've had all your tests done to confirm the diagnosis.
I have just 3 very quick questions. What supplements do you recommend? Yvonne, if you're looking for brands, I would certainly recommend the Irish brand Sona, unless Sarah has another recommendation. No,
I mean, there's lots and lots of different ones out there. So yeah, they're fine.
I go with the Irish. Definitely. Let's shop local and all that, Yvonne. So Sona, which you can get in pretty much most pharmacies and health food shops. Magella is asking, is it true that taking vitamin D can worsen rosacea?
I have never heard of it doing that. So if you can email that into us at info@celiac.ie, I will look that up for you and have a look. I've never heard that as a thing, but I can check it out for you. That's no problem.
Great stuff. Should we be getting calcium scans with celiac disease? And here's another one, just on the bone checkup, DEXA scan. How often should a celiac be having one? My doctor has told me if I feel fine, there's no need for one. So
No,
there are two questions in one that can be answered for sure.
So as an adult, you should have a bone scan when you're diagnosed to see what for children, they don't, because usually once children are diagnosed, even if there has been an issue with bones, it recovers. But for adults, once you're diagnosed, you need a bone scan. And if that's all well and good, brilliant, and carry on. And if it isn't, you're going to get some treatment and recommendations, and you'll probably need another one in about 2 years' time. And then the other time to have a bone scan, if it's been a good while, then women on menopause should have a bone scan. And it's not a question of feeling fine, because bones can be very weak and you're going to feel great. So the bone scan, you don't feel it unless you've actually broken a bone. And we don't want to wait until you're at the point of breaking a bone to have a bone scan. So yeah, as an adult, once you're diagnosed, you should be going for your bone scan, definitely.
I was diagnosed with dermatitis herpetiformis. Is that celiac?
Yep, it is, absolutely. No two ways about it. You need to be strictly gluten-free. And ideally, you should have a biopsy done as well. It's recommended that if you're diagnosed with dermatitis herpetiformis, that you should have the biopsy done. But it is celiac disease. Now, the gluten-free diet, it'll take about 2 years for a strict gluten-free diet to resolve that rash for you. So you'll probably need to stay on the medication for the dapsone that a lot of people are on. So it is quite slow to get better with that. But yeah, that is celiac disease.
7C's cod liver oil could give you your daily vitamin D requirement. Is that right?
Yeah, it would, absolutely. Cod liver oil is a great source of vitamin D.
And what did we say? Vitamin D was 10 micrograms a day.
10 micrograms a day, yeah.
That's right, okay. Let me just see now, going back up here very quickly. Bloods came back celiac after 2 weeks of eating bread on holidays. Had gluten 4 weeks before gastro test. Gastro came back negative. I got the gastro put forward. I don't want to eat gluten again to confirm. Was so sick and full of a rash. What are benefits of being labelled celiac?
Most of it is that you can absolutely do fine with that. And lots of people who have non-celiac gluten intolerance still need to be just as strictly gluten-free. It's more for the follow-up, particularly, if you can kind of go private for your bone scan and private for your tests and things like that, then, fine. But not everybody has the financial access to do it. So, if you're going to be going through the HSE, you do need to get your diagnosis so that you're on the list for your bone scans and your annual blood checks and all of those kind of things, and your dietitian. So, if you can afford to do the tests yourself, then, I don't think you need to put yourself through it. And there's lots of people who really can't. Once they've given up the gluten, they feel so sick when they go back on it that it just doesn't work. So it's to look at that. And the thing is, you might be non-celiac gluten intolerant either, so you might not be celiac with it.
So some soldiers.
Sorry?
I'm one of those soldiers, as we know.
You're one of those, that's for sure. So as I said, the advantage is really just the long-term care and to sort of being in the system with it and just having that looked after.
Okay, I love, this is a great question. I was diagnosed at birth, but I am hearing a lot in American celiac group asking what shampoos and creams, etc. we should use. I was always concentrated on ingesting gluten. Should skin hair products be a concern?
No, not at all. The actual molecule of gluten is too big to pass through your skin. So unless you're drinking the shampoo, you're going to be fine. The only one you might look at is, there was a thing in the US about 3 or 4 years ago where there was gluten in a lip balm for kids. And the way kids nearly eat the lip balm, that was an issue. But generally, no, we don't see an issue with products, even rubbing them on the skin. You would think even with the dermatitis herpetiformis that rubbing it on the skin would make it worse. But as long as the skin isn't broken, there doesn't seem to be any issue around shampoos or conditioners or anything like that. We don't see them now, unless there's some people who are ridiculously sensitive, but it's an autoimmune reaction. So the gluten does have to get into the body and react with the blood. So as I said, generally, unless you're actually drinking the shampoo, you should be fine.
Haven't eaten shampoo since I was about 6. Just back to the biopsy, is it only recommended for adults? My 10-year-old daughter was celiac diagnosed via blood test in the summer of 2019. Now, I do know in Australia, they tend to diagnose children celiac just from the TTG blood test. Is that the same here, Sarah, or do they ask for?
Now, what it is that it's not just a case of the blood test. So the blood test has to be 10 times above normal.
Yeah.
And the child has to have symptoms, and it needs to be a proper gastroenterologist who does it. It should not be something that happens even in a GP surgery. It should not be something that we decide to do ourselves. So for children whose TTGs are high, but they're not 10 times over, they will probably need a biopsy, and they generally do.
Okay.
But they put the kids to sleep for it. They don't actually,
I know.
you know, it's parents are more worried about it than the kids are usually.
Here's an interesting one. Can a celiac work in a bakery?
Right, we had an interesting one looking at this a few years ago, a farmer who was working with grain and was saying that they're breathing it in. So I've looked into it. There's, in terms of a bakery, generally not recommended. If you're breathing in that flour all the time, even though it's technically into your lungs, you will end up within your mouth and you will swallow it. And remember, it's 20 parts per million. Like, it's a tiny, tiny amount of gluten that can actually trigger it. So there isn't an official guideline on working in a bakery, but just as I said, we were looking at it in terms of inhaling the gluten, and it does seem to be a source of gluten in the diet with it. So I don't know. Generally, probably not the best
No, I wouldn't recommend it. What's your next slide, Sarah? We'll answer some more questions at the end of the next one.
Where are we now? It's really just summarizing everything that we've gone through. So just to say, what are some of the key foods for immunity? So we're looking at things like nuts and seeds, which is going to be your zinc, your selenium, but also your fiber. Yogurt and milk, we're going to be in there for your vitamin B12, but also calcium. Mandarins, kiwis, and berries for your vitamin C. Fish for kind of almost everything. So B12, zinc, selenium, protein, and then the healthy fats, and then whole grain foods, and plenty of water so that you're nice and hydrated. A general multivitamin can be helpful if you are a bit run down, no harm just to take a top up for a little while, but definitely a vitamin D. And then fish oils, if you don't take fish just for general health, but if you can eat the fish, definitely the best thing to do. So that was pretty much what I wanted to cover today. So thank you for having me here today. And thanks to Safefood for sponsoring this session for us as well.
Well, we have a couple more questions to get through if you have time.
Yeah, no worries.
Great stuff. If a celiac doesn't get a good night's sleep over a long period of time, can that cause severe fatigue? I'd say that causes severe fatigue for anybody.
It's not exclusive to people with celiac disease, but what you might take a look at is magnesium, because it's a nutrient that can be an issue. Now, it's in nuts and seeds, so if you're getting your nuts and seeds in every day, you should be fine, but a magnesium supplement can be helpful, but it's useful just to see what you can do with that. But yeah, you will be very tired. But if you're really, 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 really tired, just remember that underactive thyroid is more common in people with celiac disease. So it might be something just to check out for yourself as well.
My dad has 4 fractured vertebrae in his spine. I'm sorry to hear that about your dad. Poor guy, from osteoporosis, but also has COPD. For COPD, has been advised to avoid dairy, yet he needs calcium for his bones. What should he do? I would check out who advised him to avoid the dairy. That advice is handed out quite a lot to people for absolutely anything. So I would go back and check, you know, was it a qualified dietitian that actually went through that with him as an elimination diet, or was it sort of a piece of advice that was sort of put out there? Because about 20 years ago, there was a study that suggested that people with asthma, if they avoided milk, would do better. And I was actually working in a respiratory clinic at the time. And for the following year, I had hundreds of patients referred down to me for a milk-free diet. And we didn't have one single asthma patient improve on it. In that clinic. Now, I've met people who do. So if your dad has COPD and he went off the dairy and it got better, then I would go, great, carry on. But if there was little or no difference when he gave up the dairy, I would check who advised that of him. And if it wasn't a dietitian, maybe see if he can see a dietitian and just get that checked, because he may not actually need to be avoiding it. Now, if it is a thing that it did make a big difference to his COPD, then you're not going to want to go back on it. So you're looking then, I would definitely just put him on a calcium supplement at this stage. Like if he has osteoporosis, he'd want to be on about a 1200 milligram calcium supplement anyway. So that would be something to look at. But again, I would just check back. There is this myth that dairy causes lots of mucus. And there are specific people with a dairy allergy where it does, but it's actually very rare. Milk allergy in adults is really, really rare. So I would just maybe double check that. He may not need to be avoiding it at the moment. Okay, right. Some really interesting questions coming in here now. What's the best way to heal the gut if glutened? Also, is there any way to know how sensitive you are? Time. The thing I would say is it's not a question of sensitivity to gluten, unfortunately. So with celiac disease, although we talk about it being genetic, there's actually a number of different genes involved. And if you've got one set of the celiac genes, you'll be really sick when you eat it. And with the other set, you're not immediately really sick, but the same internal damage is there all the time. So there's nothing but time. You know, I've read all kinds of things. You can take this and eat that. It's just let the inflammation just needs to come back down. So just take it easy. You know, it's rest and hydrate. Don't get dehydrated when that happens, because if you're having a lot of vomiting or diarrhea with that, you can get very dehydrated and that makes you feel much, much worse. So I'm sorry, we've looked at this so many times in the Celiac Society, there just doesn't seem to be anything. Now, coming down the line, there are some drugs in trial at the moment.
for people who have that really severe reaction, that if they do get gluten to that, there should hopefully be some medicine in the next few years that will help. But I have to say they're at least 5 years away. But it was just one of the big conference we were at last year in Paris. They were really talking about that for those people who get such a severe reaction.
I see a question here I think I can answer. Amazing. This is great. I can answer a question. Should celiacs totally avoid may contain foods? Yes.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
What that may contain means is that they cannot guarantee that the product has been produced in a gluten-free environment. So no, stay away from may contain foods at all costs. Very quickly now, Sarah, we're going to go through, these are the last couple of questions I'm going to take now. When you're getting your blood test, should you have your thyroid levels checked with your annual blood test?
It's a really good idea to do that, yes.
Absolutely, yes. My daughter lost some hair from one area of her head. Her thyroid is small, bit down. Would this cause hair loss? Also, if she was taking gluten, would this have caused it?
So the underactive thyroid does cause hair loss, definitely. The gluten, but celiac can as well. So the two together, if you are celiac for a while and didn't realize, the lack of nutrition getting to the hair does cause hair loss, but the underactive thyroid does both. So it's a case of back onto the really strict gluten-free diet and get the medication right with the underactive thyroid, and they should come back together again then.
Greens in the diet, any color of the rainbow, put it into your diet pretty much, correct,
They're
Sarah?
all good. They're all good. I mean, the more variety, the better, really. So
absolutely any link between celiac and eczema flares?
Not specifically. They're generally not related. Now, what you might look at is sometimes the dermatitis herpetiformis, people think it's eczema. Now, a good dermatologist will know straight away that it isn't. But I've heard lots of people come in, and I've had the experience of sitting in the clinic and people come in and you're saying, oh, any of the medical history, and they go, yeah, I have this rash, this eczema for years, and you have a look at it and it's clearly dermatitis herpetiformis.
Yeah.
So don't self-diagnose your eczema, first of all. But generally we don't see celiac disease having a particular trigger on eczema. But again, if you notice that it does, then everybody's a little bit different. So it's just staying off the gluten for you.
Should I take dietary advice if I have a wheat intolerance?
It depends. I mean, on how much you're cutting out or how you're getting on. So some people can actually tolerate a little bit of wheat and it's fine. So usually what they're sensitive to is a thing in wheat called fructan, which can cause a lot of bloating in some people. So usually if the only thing you're avoiding or reducing is wheat, you should be all right. If it's a thing that you can tolerate a little bit of it, not generally. Sometimes to see a dietitian who actually does what's called a low FODMAP diet can be really, really helpful, because it can find other sources of fructans in the diet that might be causing you an issue. But nutritionally, someone who's wheat intolerant doesn't usually run into nutrition issues with that. But make sure you have ruled out celiac disease. That's the really important thing, that you've ruled out the celiac disease. Okay,
I'm going to try and get these just to be yes or no questions now, answers, Sarah, because I can see we're running over time and people are really involved in this. And thank you again to everybody who tuned in today. Is there any issue with the celiac getting the flu vaccine?
None at all, but I think Nick Kennedy is actually going to do a presentation on that tomorrow.
No, Friday.
Very specifically. Oh, Friday, is it? Okay,
yeah,
so
Friday,
tune back in at 1 o'clock for the actual expert.
The wonderful Professor Nick Kennedy will be on.
Yeah, so yes.
Any advantage taking goat's milk over cow's milk
None at all. What we do find is if someone is actually allergic to cow's milk, they are generally also allergic to goat's milk because the proteins are quite similar. So it's not usually one we'd recommend over the others. So there doesn't seem to be any issue in terms of chest. As I said, when we've done huge studies looking at mucus and chest and asthma on milk, we don't see any major links. Now, that doesn't mean an individual person doesn't themselves feel better, but overall, it's not general advice for anyone with chest complaints to avoid dairy.
Okay. Should I be keeping my eye on my son to make sure he isn't celiac? I presume that's if you have a celiac in the family.
Yep. Yes, it is something to look at. So if a parent is celiac, they do actually recommend that you'll do the TTGs for him when he's about 4 years old, again at 6 years and again at 9 years. And if by 9 he's not turning up celiac, there's a really good chance it's going to pass him by. Looking at the current research on it, that's not to say that won't change because everything changes all the time with celiac disease. But certainly at 4, 6, and 9, I would be looking at getting them checked. Okie dokie. Are organic oats okay to use? Nope, they have to be gluten-free. There you go. Any link between gluten and producing too much histamine in the body? Yes and no, but histamine is usually, if you're producing too much histamine, you're usually looking at foods like strawberries and shellfish and foods like that, not usually gluten. But sometimes what you might be is that it's a whole autoimmune thing going on in the body. with that. But I've not seen something very specific to gluten and histamine. It's usually a kind of a lot of other foods that would be a trigger there.
Okay, second last question. My doc put me on 3 tablespoons of linseed oil steeped in water every day for constipation. Works brilliant. Great stuff.
Yeah,
Would that do?
Yeah.
Would that do for the seeds intake?
Well, it's the seeds now, not the oil as such, but do it for the seeds. But yes, that will cover you for the seeds, and that works really, really well for constipation. Yeah.
Okay, last question. I'm the only celiac in my family. Feel for you, Amy. And going home for Christmas dinner is always a bit of a stress, as my family are big bakers. Is it okay for them to bake while I'm home for Christmas, or should I ask them to wait and avoid?
It should be fine, but I wouldn't stay in the kitchen while the flour was all over the place. But the other thing I'd say to you, Amy, is that have they all been tested? Because there's a 1 in 10 chance that they're celiac. So there might be actually a few celiacs hiding in there that haven't been found out. So your first degree relatives should all be tested for celiac disease: kids, brothers, sisters, and parents. So you can go home for Christmas with the news that if they haven't been checked already, they all need to get checked. You'll be even more popular than usual.
Well, what I forgot to say at the start of this, Sarah, was that the whole week is being sponsored by SuperValu, but we have individual seminars throughout the week being sponsored by other sponsors and supporters of the Coeliac Society, which this one was supported sponsored by Safefood. But we also had 6 prizes to give away on the call, and I'm delighted to say that they were chosen at random during the call. So for those of you who stayed, thank you very much. A Bundle on Organic hamper is going to Anne Collins. A Strong Roots hamper is going to Elaine Harold. A Promise Gluten-Free hamper is going to Mairead Saunders. One Seal membership is going to Tony Fry. Paula Stack has a dietitian appointment with Sarah, which is great, which means that your follow-up dietitian appointment in a year's time will only be €55 if you're a member. And a Schnitzer bread love box is going to Yvonne Carey. I am dying to know what's in this Schnitzer bread love box, because I mean, I can't think what kind of bread love is in there, but sure, anyway, we'll work on it from there. Sarah, I can't thank you enough, as always, for your informative talk and your time today. You are a gem and a delight to have with us in the season.
Thanks for having me on.
You know how much we enjoy working with you. Guys, if you are interested in getting to see Sarah, like I said, you can make an appointment through the info@coeliac.ie or through the website coeliac.ie. There are speed dietitian clinics taking place on Thursday from 10 to 3. You can go onto the website now and see if you can get a slot that suits you there, with 4 of our 3 volunteer dietitians and Sarah as well. And if you have any more questions or queries, don't hesitate to get in touch, and keep in touch with us for the rest of the week. We have some amazing things coming up, like at 5 o'clock this evening, we have our fitness with Suzanne Clark, where she'll be doing fitness as a celiac herself and fitness for people who are living with celiac disease and osteoporosis. So on that note, Sarah, thank you again very much. We've run out of time. And thank you to all our panelists. Take care, everybody. Slán go fóill, and stay well and stay safe. Take care. Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.